They introduced a predator in class. Then, the human Deathworlder outshined it. When the containment field fails, and the massive Grimshade predator escapes, chaos erupts, while others flee in terror. Kai Nolan steps forward and whistles sharply. In breathtaking silence, he crouches, extends his hand, and connects with the creature, not through dominance, but mutual respect, transforming fear into understanding as Predator meets Deathworlder. The crystalline spires of Zenith Galactic University pierced the artificially blue sky, catching the light of the distant star and fracturing it into prismatic rainbows that danced across the campus grounds. Kai Nolan paused at the entrance to the Grand Central Plaza, taking a deep breath of the carefully calibrated atmosphere. Despite its perfect oxygen-nitrogen balance, adjusted specifically to accommodate the broadest range of species possible, something about it still felt thin to his earthborn lungs. "Just another reminder that I don't quite belong," he muttered to himself, hitching his backpack higher on his shoulder. As he crossed the plaza toward the xenobiology building, the usual ripple of whispers followed him. Though the universal translators embedded in everyone's personal devices weren't meant to pick up hushed conversations, Kai had long since adjusted his to maximum sensitivity. Not out of paranoia, he told himself, but out of a need to understand. Another Deathworlder in the freshman class. Heard their planet has constant storms of acid. Evolved alongside apex predators. Natural killers, all of them. Kay kept his eyes forward, his face a careful mask of neutrality. 500 years since humanity had left Earth to join the galactic community. And still, the whispers followed. Deathworlder, predator, dangerous. The truth was more complicated. Of course, Earth was classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, not because humans themselves were particularly dangerous, but because the planet itself was frequent natural disasters, extreme temperature variations, high gravity, diverse pathogenic microorganisms, and yes, a food chain that had forced early humans to evolve both as prey and predator. Humans weren't the most dangerous thing on Earth. They had simply survived alongside the most dangerous things. But try explaining nuance to a butterfly from the perpetually calm, low-gravity paradise of Nectaris IV. Kai entered the vast atrium of the xenobiology building, a soaring space filled with specimens of plant life from 100 worlds. The humid air here felt more like home, and he allowed himself a small smile as he headed toward his first lecture of the day, Introduction to Apex Predator Behavior. "Kai, wait up!" He turned to see Zila bounding toward him, her four limbs moving in the peculiar, galloping motion of her species. The Luminari were a race of empaths from a mid-level world. Not quite a death world, but challenging enough that they understood struggle. Zila had been assigned as his dormitory neighbor, and to his surprise, had never shown the slightest fear of him. "You have Vexiron's class now too?" she asked, falling into step beside him. Her luminescent skin pulsed with friendly blue patterns. "Yeah. Hoping it might give me some insight into why everyone keeps looking at me like I'm going to suddenly sprout claws and go on a rampage." Zila's skin flickered with amusement. "Most species here evolved as prey. Kai, it's hard for them to understand a species that didn't." "Humans were prey too," Kai protested as they entered the lecture hall. "We just eventually figured out how not to be." The amphitheater-style classroom was already filling with students of various species. Kai noticed, as always, that the seats immediately around him remained empty, even as the room reached capacity. Only Zila sat nearby, her bioluminescence now pulsing with a pattern that Kai had come to recognize as protective concern. Professor Vexiron entered from a side door, his elongated Arcturian form gliding smoothly to the center of the room. The professor was renowned for his research on dangerous species across the galaxy, his exoskeleton bearing the scars of countless close encounters. "Good morning, students," Vexiron's voice resonated through the chamber. Today, we begin our exploration of apex predator psychology with something special. The university administration has granted us rare permission for a live demonstration. An excited murmur swept through the class. Live demonstrations were uncommon at Zenith. Most dangerous species studies were conducted via holographic simulation. I must emphasize, Vexiron continued, his compound eyes sweeping the room, that there is absolutely no danger. The specimen will be contained within a Class A energy field at all times. Nevertheless, this is an unprecedented opportunity to observe genuine predatory behavior up close. Kai felt a prickle of unease. Class A containment was the highest security rating available, used for the most dangerous creatures in known space. What exactly was Vexiron planning to show them? A door slid open at the base of the lecture hall, and 4 security officers entered, surrounding a hovering platform. Upon it rested what appeared to be a transparent energy cube, approximately 3 meters on each side. Within the cube, something dark and massive shifted. "Behold," Professor Vexiron announced with theatrical flair, "a juvenile Grimshade from the planet Grim Prime." Gasps rippled through the classroom. Even Kai, with his limited knowledge of extraterrestrial fauna, recognized the name. Grim Prime was one of the few worlds classified higher than Earth on the Deathworld scale, a Class 15 nightmare of evolutionary competition. As the security team positioned the containment cube at the center of the room, Kai got his first clear look at the creature inside. The Grimshade resembled nothing so much as a fusion between an Earth scorpion and a panther, but scaled up to the size of a small car. Its exoskeleton gleamed with an iridescent black sheen, 6 powerful limbs ending in hooked talons that could shred metal. A segmented tail arched over its back, tipped with what appeared to be a crystalline stinger that glowed with a sickly green light. But it was the creature's face that sent a chill down Kai's spine. Instead of the mandibles he might have expected on such an arthropod-like being, the Grimshade possessed a distinctly vertebrate-like head, with a jaw that split 4 ways to reveal rows of serrated teeth. 8 eyes, arranged in a circular pattern-tracked movement, with unnerving intelligence. "The Grimshade is the apex predator of its ecosystem," Vexiron explained, as the security officers stepped back, activating additional safeguards around the containment field. "They are ambush hunters with exceptional patience, sometimes waiting days for the perfect moment to strike. They possess problem-solving intelligence comparable to Earth's higher primates, and have been observed using tools in the wild." Kai noticed that most of his classmates had shrunk back in their seats, some of the more sensitive species emitting pheromones of fear that his enhanced translator detected as chemical warnings. Even Zila's skin had dimmed to a cautious gray. Yet, something felt off about the containment field. Kai had studied energy systems as part of his pre-university coursework, and there was a faint oscillation pattern in the field that shouldn't have been there. A barely perceptible flicker in the upper left quadrant of the cube. Professor Vexiron was continuing his lecture. "Observe the Grimshade's posture. Though it appears relaxed, it is continuously testing its environment. Notice the slight movements of its primary sensory appendages, constantly gathering data." Indeed, the creature was methodically exploring its enclosure, its movements deliberate and measured. When it reached the corner where Kai had noticed the anomaly, it paused, one claw extending to touch the energy barrier with exquisite gentleness. A small spark erupted where claw met field, causing several students to yelp in alarm. "No need for concern," Vexiron assured them. "The containment field automatically compensates for any attempted breach. This behavior is precisely what makes apex predators so fascinating. They never stop testing boundaries, never accept limitations without verification." Kai felt a strange resonance with the professor's words. Wasn't that exactly what humans had done throughout their history? Never accepting the limitations of their death world, always pushing boundaries, surviving against odds that should have extinguished them? He discreetly activated his personal scanner, a device that his Earth University had provided before his journey to Zenith, ostensibly for analyzing alien environments for human safety. Kai had modified it to detect a broader spectrum of energy patterns. He aimed it subtly at the containment field, confirming his suspicion. There was indeed a harmonic instability in the field matrix. Minor, but present. The Grimshade, as if sensing his attention, swiveled its cluster of eyes directly toward Kai. For a moment, predator and human locked gazes across the room. Kai resisted the instinctive urge to look away, a prey response that his ancestors had trained out of themselves over millennia of evolution. Fascinating, Professor Vexiron's voice cut through Kai's concentration. It appears our specimen has identified the most threatening presence in the room. All eyes turned to Kai, who felt his face flush. I'm not a threat, he said quietly. Of course not, Vexiron agreed smoothly. But to a predator, potential competition is identified instinctually. The Grimshade recognizes in you something it understands. Another creature evolved to survive a harsh world. Kai wanted to protest that humans weren't predators in the same sense as the Grimshade. But the creature chose that moment to make a sudden movement toward the weakened section of the field. This time, the resulting energy discharge was more pronounced, causing the containment cube to momentarily flicker. A ripple of alarm spread through the classroom. "Professor!" called out a Kragok student, their silicon-based body grinding nervously. "Is the containment field stable?" "Absolutely," Vexiron assured them, though Kai noticed the security officers exchanging concerned glances. This is simply an opportunity to observe predatory testing behavior. The Grimshade has identified what it perceives as a potential weakness, and is methodically applying increasing pressure to verify. "Like I said," Zila whispered to Kai, "you have more in common with it than you might think." Kai frowned, watching as the Grimshade continued its systematic probing of the field's weak spot. Each touch of its claw caused a slightly larger discharge, and each discharge seemed to weaken the field further. He checked his scanner again. The harmonic instability was growing. "Professor," Kai raised his hand, "I think there might be a problem with the containment field." Vexiron's compound eyes swiveled toward him. "An interesting observation, Mr. Nolan. What makes you say that?" "There's a harmonic oscillation in the upper left quadrant. The frequency is—" He was interrupted by a much larger spark from the containment field, accompanied by an audible crackle of energy. The Grimshade had reared back on its hind limbs and struck the weakness with considerably more force. This time, the entire field visibly flickered. The security officers rushed forward, activating their emergency protocols. But Kai could already see it was too late. The oscillation had cascaded into a full harmonic breakdown. "Everyone remain calm," Vexiron commanded, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the containment field failing completely, energy crackling and dispersing in a shower of sparks. The Grimshade remained perfectly still for one heartbeat, as if surprised by its own success. Then, with frightening speed for something so large, it leaped from the platform onto the floor of the lecture hall. Chaos erupted. Students screamed, scrambled over each other, some attempting to squeeze through exits, while others froze in terror. The security officers deployed secondary containment measures, energy nets that the Grimshade batted aside with contemptuous ease. "Evacuate immediately!" Vexiron shouted, placing himself between the creature and the nearest group of students. Kai found himself moving not toward the exit but forward, his mind racing through everything he knew about predator behavior from Earth studies. The Grimshade was free but disoriented, surrounded by potential prey fleeing in all directions. A stimulus overload that would soon crystallize into focused hunting behavior once it identified the easiest target. He glanced at his scanner. The secondary containment systems were attempting to re-establish a field, but they needed time to calibrate, time that the panicking crowd didn't have. As the Grimshade oriented itself, focusing on a group of smaller butterflyly students who had become trapped against a wall, Kai made his decision. Instead of retreating, he stepped forward into the cleared area of the room and let out a sharp, piercing whistle, a sound that cut through the chaos like a knife. The effect was immediate. The Grimshade whirled toward him, all 8 eyes focusing with laser intensity. The lecture hall fell into sudden, shocked silence. "Mr. Nolan," Professor Vexiron hissed, "get back immediately!" Kai ignored him, keeping his posture straight, eyes locked with the predators. He took another deliberate step forward. "Kai, what are you doing?" Zila's voice trembled with fear, her skin pulsing emergency red patterns. "Trust me," he murmured, never breaking eye contact with the Grimshade. The creature stalked toward him, its movements now fluid and purposeful. Kai could hear security personnel frantically working to restore containment. But he knew they wouldn't be fast enough. The Grimshade was now just 5 meters away, its crystalline stinger glowing brighter as it prepared to strike. Kai did the last thing anyone expected. He slowly, deliberately, crouched down to the creature's eye level and extended his right hand, palm down, in a non-threatening gesture. "I see you," he said in a low, steady voice. "I respect you." The Grimshade paused, its head tilting slightly, as if confused by this prey that neither fled nor attacked. Kai remained perfectly still, hand extended. The room around them had fallen into stunned silence. Then, with excruciating slowness, Kai began to move his hand in a gentle arc, mimicking the movement patterns he had observed in the creature's own communication gestures. It was a gamble based on fragmented knowledge of Earth's predators and the brief observation of the Grimshade's behavior. But it was all he had. The creature's forward movement halted completely. Its sensory appendages quivered, reassessing this strange being before it. "That's right," Kai continued in the same calm voice. "I'm not prey. I'm not predator. I'm something else." To the astonishment of everyone in the room, the Grimshade's aggressive posture subtly shifted. It lowered its stinger slightly and extended one foreclaw toward Kai's outstretched hand, mirroring his gesture with uncanny precision. A collective gasp rippled through the watching students. Professor Vexiron had gone utterly still, his scientific mind clearly racing to process what he was witnessing. Kai maintained the delicate connection, feeling as though he were balanced on the edge of a blade. Then, in a move that drew audible exclamations from around the room, he slowly rose from his crouch and took a single step closer to the Grimshade. Now, within striking distance, he continued the same measured movement of his hand, adding a slight variation, a gesture of acknowledgement. The Grimshade's sensory appendages fluttered rapidly, processing this new information. Then, in an unprecedented response, it lowered its massive body into a posture that was neither threatening nor submissive, but something closer to respectful. "Security team, hold your position," Professor Vexiron ordered quietly. "Let's see where this goes." With deliberate slowness, Kai extended his hand further, now mere centimeters from the creature's armored head. The Grimshade remained motionless, all 8 eyes fixed on him with what could only be described as curiosity. Then, in a moment that would later be viewed billions of times across the galactic network, Kai gently placed his palm against the creature's exoskeleton. The contact was brief, just 3 seconds of connection between human and alien predator. But in that moment, something profound passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, of kindred evolutionary paths. The spell broke as the security team finally reactivated the containment field, this time projecting it directly around the Grimshade. The creature made no attempt to resist as the energy barrier formed around it, separating it from Kai. As the field stabilized and security officers moved to secure the now-contained predator, the lecture hall erupted in a mixture of relieved sighs, astonished exclamations, and a few spontaneous cheers. Kai stepped back, suddenly aware of how rapidly his heart was pounding. The adrenaline that had carried him through the encounter began to ebb, leaving him slightly shaky. Professor Vexiron approached, his compound eyes fixed on Kai with an intensity that rivaled the Grimshades. "Mr. Nolan," he said, his voice a mixture of reprimand and awe. "That was simultaneously the most foolish and most remarkable thing I have ever witnessed in my 60 years of xenobiological research." Kai managed a weak smile. "Sorry for disrupting your lecture, Professor." Disrupting. Vexiron's exoskeleton vibrated in what Kai had learned was Arcturian laughter. "Young man, you just provided the most valuable live demonstration in the history of this course." As the security team transported the now docile Grimshade out of the lecture hall, Kai became aware that the other students were looking at him differently. Gone were the fearful glances and wary distance. Instead, there was something new in their expressions: curiosity, reassessment, and in some cases, unmistakable respect. Zila bounded up to him, her skin flashing patterns of blue and gold that his translator interpreted as astonishment, pride, relief. "How did you know that would work?" she demanded. "You could have been killed." Kai shook his head. "I didn't know, but I recognized something in its behavior. The same patterns you might see in Earth's predators when they're evaluating another predator. Not prey. It wasn't looking for food. It was establishing territory and hierarchy." "But how did you know what gestures to make?" "I didn't exactly. But on Earth, many predator species use similar body language to signal non-aggression. I just adapted what I knew." Professor Vexiron, who had been listening to this exchange, made a thoughtful clicking sound. "Mr. Nolan, I believe you've demonstrated something far more valuable than courage today. You've shown a cross-species intuition that transcends conventional xenobiological understanding." By the time Kai returned to his dormitory that evening, the incident had spread across the university's communication networks. His personal device was flooded with messages from classmates who had never previously acknowledged his existence, all wanting to know more about his encounter with the Grimshade. Even more surprising was a formal communication from the university administration, commending his quick thinking while also firmly requesting that he refrain from direct physical contact with Class A dangerous species in the future, regardless of apparent rapport. Kai sat on his bed, scrolling through the messages, when a knock came at his door. It slid open to reveal Zila, accompanied by a small group of students from their xenobiology class. A butterflyly named Mira, whose delicate wings still trembled slightly. A crystalline geoden named Traz, whose faceted body refracted the room's light. And a towering Kragox named Hrun, whose silicon-based form moved with deliberate care in the unfamiliar environment of the human dormitory sector. "We hope we're not intruding," Mira said, her translucent wings catching the light. "But we wanted to thank you personally." Kai blinked in surprise. "Thank me for what?" "I was trapped against the wall," she explained, her melodious voice quavering. "The Grimshade was looking right at me when you distracted it. On my homeworld. We are always prey." Hrun's gravelly voice added, "Many of us have misunderstood what it means to come from a death world. We assumed it made you dangerous to us. But today," Traz chimed in, light patterns dancing across their crystalline form, "you showed us that surviving a harsh world can create something beyond merely predator or prey." Kai felt a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "I appreciate that, but honestly, I was just reacting on instinct." "That's precisely what makes it remarkable," came a new voice. Professor Vexiron stood in the doorway, his tall form having to stoop slightly to enter the human-proportioned room. "Your instinct, shaped by your evolutionary history, was not to flee or to attack, but to communicate." The professor moved further into the room, his compound eyes reflecting the artificial light. "The university board has asked me to speak with you about today's incident. There will be a formal review. Of course, Containment failures of this magnitude require thorough investigation. But I wanted to discuss something else with you. Kai felt a flicker of apprehension. Am I in trouble? Quite the contrary, Vexiron replied. I would like to invite you to give a guest lecture in our advanced xenobiology seminar on understanding and interacting with apex species. Your perspective would be invaluable.
Me? But I'm just a first-year student. I don't have any qualifications to—
You have the most important qualification. Vexiron interrupted. You have lived experience that bridges worlds. And after today's demonstration, I believe many students would benefit from hearing your insights. As the professor and the other students left, promising to connect with Kai the following day to discuss the lecture opportunity further, Zila remained behind. Her bioluminescence had shifted to a pattern that Kai hadn't seen before, a gentle pulsing that seemed to convey thoughtfulness. You know, she said, settling onto the edge of his desk. When they first announced a human would be in our dormitory block, there were petitions to have you relocated. Kai's expression fell.
I didn't know that.
The administration rejected them. Of course. But the fear was real. Her skin rippled with patterns of remembered concern. The stories about Earth and humans, they're frightening to many species. A world of constant disasters, violent weather, tectonic instability, dangerous microorganisms, and predators that can run for hours without stopping.
Earth isn't just about danger, Kai protested. It's also beautiful. We have oceans and forests and—
I know, Zila interrupted gently. That's what I've been trying to tell others, that Deathworlders aren't defined only by the harshness of their planets. But today, you showed everyone something even more important. What's that? That the very adaptations that helped humans survive a Deathworld, your problem-solving, your ability to understand predator behavior, your capacity to stay calm in chaos, these aren't things to fear. They're valuable. Today, those traits saved lives. The next morning, Kai's personal device alerted him that video of his encounter with the Grimshade had spread beyond the university network and was now trending across multiple interplanetary communication channels. The most popular clips focused on the moment of contact between human and predator, accompanied by commentary ranging from scientific analysis to almost mystical interpretation. He groaned, burying his face in his pillow. The last thing he wanted was to become some kind of viral sensation. He had come to Zenith to study, to learn about the galaxy, not to become known as the human who touched a Grimshade. His device chimed again with a message from Professor Vexiron, requesting his presence in the Xenobiology Department's conference room as soon as possible. With a sigh, Kai dressed and made his way across campus. To his surprise, the usual whispers that followed him had transformed. Students of various species now pointed him out with expressions of awe rather than fear. Some even nodded respectfully as he passed, a few of the bolder ones calling out greetings. The conference room was occupied not just by Professor Vexiron, but by several senior faculty members and a distinguished-looking Illuminar who Kai recognized as Dr. Lumina, the university's chancellor. Mr. Nolan, the chancellor greeted him, her luminescent skin pulsing with formal patterns. Please, sit down. Kai took the offered seat, his apprehension growing. Have I done something wrong? Dr. Lumina's skin flickered with what might have been amusement. That depends entirely on your perspective. You've certainly disrupted the usual order of things. Professor Vexiron stepped forward. Kai, the containment failure yesterday was not entirely accidental. Kai stared at him. What do you mean? The harmonic instability you detected was deliberately introduced into the field matrix. It was designed to fail, though not quite as dramatically or quickly as it did.
But why would you?
Kai began. Then understanding dawned.
It was a test. For me.
Chancellor Lumina nodded, her patterns shifting to convey seriousness. For the past 5 standard years, Zenith University has been conducting a classified research initiative called the Deathworld Integration Project. Earth is not the only Deathworld whose inhabitants have joined galactic society, though humans are among the most numerous and successful Deathworld species. The project, Vexiron continued, aims to better understand how Deathworld adaptations might benefit the broader galactic community. Yesterday's incident was meant to observe how you would react to a crisis situation involving a dangerous predator. We expected you to either retreat efficiently or perhaps attempt to assist in containment. What we did not expect, another faculty member added. A Tholian, whose gelatinous form quivered with what Kai had learned was excitement, was direct communication and contact with the specimen. The Grimshade is not known to be amenable to such interaction, even among trained handlers. Kai felt a surge of anger. You put everyone in that room at risk for an experiment? The risk was calculated, Chancellor Lumina assured him, though her skin patterns suggested a degree of contrition. The security team was prepared to deploy multiple redundant containment measures if necessary. No student was ever in true danger. But you couldn't have known how the Grimshade would react to being released in a room full of potential prey, Kai argued. Actually, we could, Vexiron said. The specimen was raised in captivity and has undergone extensive behavioral conditioning. It was dangerous, yes, but not indiscriminately aggressive. We needed a genuine reaction from you and the other students, which required a perception of real danger. Kai sat back in his chair, processing this information. So, what happens now? Was I what you were looking for in your project? The Chancellor and faculty exchanged glances. You exceeded all parameters of our expected response matrix, the Tholian professor said, their translucent body rippling with excitement. Your approach was unprecedented in our research. Chancellor Lumina leaned forward. We would like to offer you a unique opportunity. Mr. Nolan, we are establishing a new research initiative at Zenith, the Deathworld Studies Program, dedicated to understanding and applying the evolutionary adaptations of species from harsh environments. We would like you to be a founding participant. But I'm just a first-year student, Kai protested. Which makes you ideally suited, Vexiron countered. You haven't yet been fully indoctrinated into conventional xenobiological thinking. Your instincts are still authentic. The offer was tempting. Instead of fighting against his Deathworld heritage, Kai could help reshape how the galactic community viewed it. But something still bothered him. What about the other students? The ones who were genuinely terrified yesterday? Using them as unwitting participants in your experiment wasn't fair to them. The Chancellor's skin darkened with what Kai recognized as embarrassment. You are correct, Mr. Nolan. The method, while effective, raised ethical concerns among several faculty members as well, which is another reason why your perspective would be valuable to the program, to help us design research protocols that are both effective and ethical. After further discussion of the program's details, Kai left the conference room with a lot to think about. As he walked through the university's central plaza, he noticed Zila waiting for him near one of the ornamental water features that dotted the campus. So, she said as he approached, her skin pulsing with curiosity. What did the High Council want with you? Kai gave her a wry smile. Apparently, I was part of an experiment yesterday. The containment field was designed to fail. Zila's luminescence flared with shock. They deliberately released a Grimshade in a classroom full of students? It was controlled, sort of. Kai explained what he had learned about the Deathworld Integration Project and the offer to join the new research program. When he finished, Zila was silent for a moment, her patterns shifting through complex emotions that Kai couldn't fully interpret. Are you going to accept? She finally asked. Kai gazed up at the artificially perfect sky. I'm not sure yet. Part of me is excited about the opportunity to change how Deathworlders are perceived. But another part feels like I'd be allowing them to define me by my planet's classification.
Maybe it's not about being defined by where you're from, Zila suggested, falling into step beside him as they began walking. Maybe it's about recognizing that where you're from has shaped who you are, in ways both obvious and subtle. They crossed the plaza in companionable silence, passing groups of students from dozens of worlds. Kai noticed that the usual empty space that formed around him was less pronounced today. Instead of avoiding his path, several students nodded acknowledgement, and a few even smiled or made their species equivalent gesture. "I think," Kai said slowly, "that I want to help build something new. Not just a research program about Deathworlders, but a bridge between different evolutionary paths. Because yesterday showed me that even the most seemingly incompatible species can find ways to communicate." Zila's skin brightened with approval. "That sounds like a worthy goal." Over the next few weeks, Kai's life at Zenith University transformed. His guest lecture in Professor Vexiron's advanced seminar was so well received that it evolved into a regular series, with Kai sharing insights about Earth's predator-prey dynamics and how they had shaped human psychology and social structures. More surprisingly, students from across the university began seeking him out, not as a curiosity or spectacle, but as a valuable resource. Some wanted to understand Deathworld adaptations for their research. Others were simply curious about Earth and humans in a way they had been too fearful to express before. Kai found himself at the center of an impromptu study group that met in the university's arboretum, a space designed to house plant specimens from various worlds. The group had grown organically, beginning with just Zila and a few curious classmates, but soon expanding to include students from all years and disciplines. "So on Earth," Kai was explaining to a rapt audience one evening, "humans evolved alongside predators that hunted primarily by sight. This shaped our psychology in subtle ways. We instinctively fear darkness, not because we can't see, but because we evolved knowing that predators could see better than we could in low light." "Is that why your dormitory illumination is always set to maximum?" asked Traz, the crystalline geoden, light refracting through their faceted body. Kai laughed. "Probably. Some adaptations are so deep we don't even recognize them as adaptations. They just feel like preferences. Like how butterflyly instinctively move away from any shadow passing overhead." Mira offered. "On our homeworld, aerial predators were the greatest threat." The conversation flowed naturally from evolutionary psychology to cultural adaptations, with students from various worlds sharing how their species' history had shaped their social structures and behaviors. It was exactly the kind of cross-species understanding that Kai had hoped to foster. After the study group dispersed, Kai remained in the arboretum, finding comfort among the Earth specimens that the university maintained in a special section. The familiar shapes of oak leaves and the scent of pine needles eased a homesickness he hadn't fully acknowledged. "I thought I might find you here," came Professor Vexiron's voice from behind him. Kai turned to see the Arcturian professor approaching along the winding path. "Just reconnecting with a piece of home." Vexiron nodded, his compound eyes reflecting the artificial twilight that the Arboretum systems had begun to generate. "That is a universal need, I think. No matter how far we travel from our homeworlds, we carry them within us." They walked together among the Earth specimens, Vexiron occasionally stopping to examine a particular plant with scientific interest. "Your study group has become quite popular," the professor commented. "I've heard students discussing your sessions in my advanced classes." Kai shrugged modestly. "We're just sharing perspectives. It's nothing formal." "Which is precisely why it works," Vexiron said. "Formal structures have their place, but true understanding often happens in these informal exchanges." He paused beside a small maple tree, its leaves beginning to show autumn colors despite the controlled environment. "The Deathworld Studies Program Committee has reviewed your proposal." Kai had submitted his vision for the program 2 weeks earlier,
suggesting a fundamental shift from studying Deathworlders as subjects to engaging them as partners in research, with a focus on practical applications of Deathworld adaptations to benefit the broader galactic community. And, Kai asked, trying to keep the anxiety from his voice. It was approved unanimously, Vexiron said. Mandibles clicking in what Kai had learned was an expression of pleasure. Your approach bridges scientific rigor with ethical consideration in a way that impressed even the most traditional committee members. Relief and excitement flooded through Kai. Thank you, Professor. I'll try not to let you down. I have no concerns on that front. Vexiron's exoskeleton shifted in what might have been the Arcturian equivalent of a smile. In fact, there's something else I wanted to discuss with you. The Xenobiology Department has received an unusual request from the Galactic Zoological Conservation Authority. What kind of request? They're assembling a team to assess a newly discovered ecosystem on Nexus 7. The planet has extreme environmental variations, similar to Earth, but has developed entirely different evolutionary solutions. They specifically requested a human researcher with demonstrated ability to understand apex predator behavior. Kai stared at him. They want me, but I'm not even a graduate, let alone a qualified researcher. You would be part of a team led by experienced xenobiologists, Vexiron assured him. Your role would be consultative, focused specifically on predator-prey dynamics. After your encounter with the Grimshade, your perspective is considered uniquely valuable. The opportunity was both thrilling and intimidating. When would this expedition happen? During the intersemester break, you would miss no regular classes, though you would receive academic credit for the fieldwork. Vexiron's compound eyes studied Kai carefully. It is, of course, entirely your choice. Nexus 7 is not without its dangers. Kai thought about it, looking up through the Arboretum's transparent dome at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there was Earth, the death world that had shaped his species, and somewhere else was Nexus 7, a world that might help him better understand that heritage. I'll do it, he said finally, but I have one condition. Which is? I want Zila to come too. Her empathic abilities would be invaluable for understanding alien creature behavior, and she's been studying Deathworld adaptations alongside me. Vexiron considered this. I believe that could be arranged. Her species perspective would indeed complement the research team. When Kai shared the news with Zila the next day, her skin flashed with such brilliant patterns of excitement that he had to shield his eyes. A real xenobiological expedition, she exclaimed, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. To a Class 13 Deathworld. Do you know how rare that opportunity is for someone who isn't a senior researcher? I think that's why they want a human along, Kai said. We come pre-adapted to harsh environments. Zila's patterns settled into something more thoughtful. It's more than that, Kai. After the Grimshade incident, word spread beyond just the university. The way you interacted with that predator, it challenged a lot of assumptions about interspecies communication. Some of the leading xenobiologists in the Galactic Union have been discussing your approach. Kai felt his face grow warm with embarrassment. I just did what felt right in the moment. Exactly, Zila said. And that intuitive understanding is exactly what's needed for work like this. Most researchers approach apex predators with either clinical detachment or outright fear. You showed a third path, respect. As the intersemester break approached, Kai found himself increasingly occupied with preparations for the Nexus 7 expedition. There were equipment fittings, environmental briefings, and countless forms acknowledging the risks of visiting a minimally explored Deathworld. But even as he prepared for this new adventure, he made time to continue his study group and to work on the framework for the Deathworld Studies program. What had begun as an informal gathering had evolved into something more structured, with students from Deathworld species sharing their experiences and perspectives alongside those from more benign environments. One evening, as Kai was reviewing xenobiological data on Nexus 7 in his dormitory, he received an unexpected communication alert. The sender identification showed it was from Earth, specifically from his former professor at the University of New Amazon. The message was brief but meaningful. Saw your Grimshade encounter video. The university is proud. Your work at Zenith is opening doors for future human students in xenobiology. Keep pushing boundaries. Professor Torres. Attached was data showing a significant increase in applications from Earth students to extraterrestrial universities, particularly in fields related to xenobiology and interspecies communication. The Grimshade video had apparently gone viral, not just in the broader galactic community, but on Earth as well, inspiring a new generation of humans to see their Deathworld heritage as an asset rather than a liability. Kai saved the message, feeling a complex mixture of pride and responsibility. He had come to Zenith hoping simply to fit in, to overcome the prejudice against Deathworlders and complete his education without incident. Instead, he had stumbled into a role as an ambassador of sorts, not officially appointed, but effectively functioning as a bridge between Earth and the galactic community. The night before the expedition team was scheduled to depart for Nexus 7, the Xenobiology department hosted a small reception. Kai was surprised to find not just the research team in attendance, but many of his fellow students and professors from various departments. Chancellor Lumina approached him, her luminescence displaying formal patterns of respect. Mr. Nolan, before you depart on your expedition, I wanted to personally thank you for your contributions to Zenith University. Your presence here has been more transformative than I think you realize. Kai accepted the thanks with a polite nod. I'm just grateful for the opportunities I've been given. Opportunities you've earned, the Chancellor corrected. The Deathworld Studies program has already received inquiries from 7 other universities interested in establishing similar initiatives. You've started something important, a new way of understanding the evolutionary diversity of our galactic community. As the reception continued, Kai found a quiet moment with Zila, who was conversing excitedly with other members of the expedition team. Nervous about tomorrow? She asked, her skin showing patterns of friendly concern. A little, Kai admitted. Nexus 7 sounds intense even by Earth standards. That's why we have you, said a new voice. Kai turned to see Dr. Narao, the expedition's leader, a Valerian whose tough, hide-like skin and multiple eyes spoke of his own Deathworld origins. Your instincts will be valuable on a world where established research protocols may not apply. I'll do my best, Kai promised. That's all anyone can ask, Dr. Narao replied. But based on what I've seen and heard, your best is quite remarkable for a first-year student. Later that night, alone in his dormitory, Kai composed a message to his family back on Earth. He described the expedition to Nexus 7, the development of the Deathworld Studies program, and his evolving perspective on what it meant to be a human in the broader galactic community. He ended the message with a thought that had been crystallizing in his mind over the past weeks. I came to Zenith thinking I needed to overcome being from Earth, to somehow compensate for being a Deathworlder. What I've discovered instead is that understanding our evolutionary heritage, really understanding it, not just as a limitation but as a unique lens through which we see the universe, might be humanity's greatest contribution to galactic society. We know what it means to adapt, to survive against odds, to find beauty in harsh realities. That perspective is rare and valuable. I'm no longer trying to fit in despite being human. I'm learning how to contribute because I am human. As he prepared for sleep, Kai glanced at his personal scanner, which he had modified further since the Grimshade incident. It now incorporated additional sensing capabilities designed specifically for the unknown environment of Nexus 7. The device symbolized his journey at Zenith, taking what he knew from Earth and adapting it to new challenges, creating something neither purely human nor purely alien, but a bridge between worlds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges on a planet more dangerous than most species would ever willingly visit. But Kai felt ready. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued his first days at Zenith had transformed into something else. Not reckless confidence, but a grounded understanding of his own capabilities and limitations. He was a Deathworlder. Yes, but that was no longer a label that defined or limited him. It was simply one part of a complex identity that included student, researcher, bridge builder, and perhaps most importantly, explorer. Not just of strange new worlds, but of the boundaries between species that had evolved along vastly different paths. As the artificial lights of his dormitory dimmed to simulate Earth's night cycle, Kai thought about the Grimshade. Somewhere in the university's secure research facility, that predator from another death world was teaching researchers about its species, just as Kai was teaching others about humans. Two apex adaptations, finding ways to communicate across the evolutionary divide. Exploration and empathy overcome fear, Kai murmured to himself, the phrase crystallizing his philosophy as he drifted toward sleep. Tomorrow would bring Nexus 7 and all its unknown dangers. But it would also bring new connections, new understandings, a chance to further bridge the gap between worlds that had once seemed impossibly different. And in that thought was the real promise of the galactic community. Not that different species would become the same, but that they would learn to value their differences as essential parts of a greater whole. Kai's journey had only just begun, but already he could see the path stretching before him, challenging, sometimes dangerous, but ultimately leading toward a deeper understanding of what it meant to be alive in a universe of incredible diversity. That, he decided as sleep finally claimed him, was worth all the whispers, all the challenges, all the struggles of being a Deathworlder in a universe that had yet to fully understand what that really meant.